what is this? Sorry, is this our fourth meeting? Is this the fourth one? Fourth one? Supposed to be our last one, but we decided last time that we're going to need one more to just kind of to hammer through everything. Appreciate, on behalf of Governor DeWine, appreciate everybody's time, everybody's attention. We did have some conversations in between this meeting and the last with various working group members about potential recommendations and what that looks like. What we want to do with this meeting, we have a couple of presentations that we need to finish up with as far as information and putting information before the working group. But we talked last time about the need to really kind of transition into discussion and deliberation over what these recommendations should look like and how we think we should steer this report. So that is what we're going to spend the majority of this working group meeting kind of talking about and going over. So I want to kick it over to Director Mertz for a couple of introductory comments, and then we'll jump into our presentations. So.
Yeah, I won't hold things up too much. I'm just looking forward to, we've had a lot of information out there. I think we see the landscape, what the challenges are, what the opportunities are. So turning that into what do we do differently in the future to help those small communities that are burdened by responses. So look forward to getting clarity on that.
Thank you, Director. And we'll just go ahead and we'll jump straight in. Look, Dan, this is we had you scheduled for 2 other meetings to do a presentation. Appreciate your patience and your flexibility. Unfortunately, since you work in the Department of Public Safety, you're the one who, when we need to swing someone out, you were it. So again, I know it takes time to prepare for a presentation like this. I know you've used your time a couple times in preparation for doing it, and it hasn't come to fruition yet. Today, you're first up. So thank you. Floor is yours. And we have, I know, at least coming in through Teams, we have Sheriff Lavorchek. Sheriff Lavorchek was on his way down here. He got a significant way down here and realized he had a personnel shortage with respect to the operation of a specific piece of equipment. So there's only a couple people who are licensed. He's one of them. Those people who are licensed to use this piece of equipment or trained to use this piece of equipment, a couple of them are out for, I think, paternity leave, other different types of leave. One called in sick today, I think, so he was the only one who still could operate this equipment, and this equipment is the type of equipment that you would use if you had an ice piece of ice break off. So I guess it's supposed to be a little warmer up there today on the lake. Supposed to get some winds up there, which I think create the type of conditions where you have those ice. What's it called, Sima? The flows, yeah. You have an ice flow where it cracks and it takes off with a bunch of ice fishermen on top of it. So he wants to be up there to operate this piece of equipment if need be. So, Sheriff, appreciate you at least coming in and being available through Teams. And obviously, if you get the call to go rescue someone on an ice flow, don't feel bad about dropping and going. So, Dan, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. When we received this request, we obviously turned that over to our research and analysis section. And this is Chief Sathi Arand, and she put this presentation together, and she can much better articulate the information that's in this slide deck. So I'm just going to turn it over to her. Thank you.
Am I in charge of the clicker, or is someone else doing it? Just me? Okay. All right, good morning, everyone. As Dan mentioned, I'm Sathi Arand. I'm the Chief of Research and Analysis in the Division of EMS. And when we received this request a while ago, my team's the one that put the data together looking at EMS runs that occurred in select Ohio State parks from 2023 to 2024. So the query was to present EMS run data from 2023 to 2024 from the following Ohio state parks. These specific parks is obviously not a comprehensive list of Ohio state parks. This is just a list that was provided to us. So I guess these were the parks that were of interest, and they are of varying attendance levels. So some of these parks, let's say, are more popular than others or get more attendance over the course of the year than other parks. I think the intention was to put them in categories. So we have EMS runs from the more well-attended state parks and maybe the less attended state parks as well. I'll give you just one, that's the list. Yeah, so we presented the EMS run data broken down by individual state park. So how many runs between 2023 and 2024 did each state park have? The unique EMS agencies that responded to the runs that occurred within each state park. We also looked at the median time from dispatch to scene in minutes. So the median time that it took from when dispatch got the call to an EMS unit arriving to the scene. Now, as I'm sure many of you know, in the state park, when you arrive to the scene and when you arrive to the patient may be two different things. That is the case in any incident, but especially in the state park, you might see some significant differences there. So we provided median time from dispatch to patient as well in minutes. We also looked at, so for the unique EMS agencies that responded to each run in the state park, what percentage of runs for that agency were within a select Ohio state park? So how did we get this information? So MCERS is a state repository for Ohio EMS incident data. We collect data regarding the delivery of EMS care in Ohio. So one thing to keep in mind is that MCERS does not collect incident data specific to state parks. So the way I describe that is there is no check button saying like, did this run occur in a state park? Check yes or no. That would be really helpful, but that is not the case. So instead, we had to use a proxy method. So we used the variable eScene15, which is incident street address, to identify state park runs. Just skipping down to the bottom bullet point for a second. So we pulled all Ohio state park addresses from the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, and we used that as the main street address for eScene15. We also did a scan. We looked for address keywords associated with state parks. Sometimes you don't get street address, but you'll just say like Hocking Hill State Park. So then we know, okay, that's probably a state park. We also looked at the main park street address, a park campground, park lodge, or trailhead. It's a free text field, so sometimes, the street address won't be perfect, but there are other keywords that you can scan for to identify that this run occurred in a state park and which one it was. Things to consider, data in this report is completely dependent on the quality and completeness of the data that is reported to MCERS by EMS agencies. We include this disclaimer in all of the data requests that we put out publicly. EMS agencies are only required to report incidents that involved transport after an emergency response. So any Ohio EMS incident where the incident did occur, but it does not meet that criteria, may not be reported to MCERS or included in the analysis. That is especially pertinent here because a lot of EMS runs that involve a state park, some do involve transport, but there are some that, maybe don't. Maybe a sprained ankle or a cut or something. Maybe, they didn't get transported, which means that that incident may not actually be included in this analysis. So the data that we're presenting to you today are only the runs that actually resulted in a transport by an EMS unit. This analysis identifies state park EMS runs using incident street address, but as I described in the previous slide, this method is not a definitive approach. Only addresses that could be verified as part of the specific state park were included in the analysis, so there is a possibility that we are over or identifying state park incidents. Further analysis is needed to fine-tune an approach to best identify state park EMS runs within MCERS. Are there any questions so far? Okay, so now we'll go to the results. Okay, so table 1 is looking at the number of EMS runs in select Ohio state parks collected from MCERS for 2023 and 2024. So that is cumulative over 2 years. That's 2 years worth of data. So I just gave you guys the raw numbers here. Hocking Hills has the highest number. It's a very well-attended state park. And then you'll see the total. EMS runs were not identified for Lake White, Sycamore, or Fort Run state parks. As I said, that does not mean that EMS never visited those state parks. There's a possibility that they did. It's possible that within our methods, we were not able to identify those runs, or maybe the runs that did occur did not result in an EMS transport, and therefore were not included in EMSRs. Just something to keep in mind. Okay, so table 2 is a little bit larger. We are looking at unique EMS agencies that responded to incidents in select Ohio state parks, median time from dispatch to scene, median time from dispatch to patient. Okay, so let's break this down. Looking at EMS agency name, I mean, you guys can just scan through them and see what unique EMS agencies actually responded to runs within each specific Ohio state park. You see I have the number there. You have median time from dispatch to scene in minutes, median time from dispatch to patient in minutes. You do see that the latter does have slightly longer times than the former, which would make sense because, as I mentioned before, dispatch to patient would take a little longer than when you just arrive at the scene. Yep, so you see that Hocking Hills had the largest median time and time from dispatch to patient as well. There are parks like, Mount Gilead State Park where the median time for both EMS response times was significantly lower. That could depend on, the way the park is situated, how far away the EMS unit is from the state park, the specific challenges that were associated with each EMS run, the needs of the patient. There could be a variety of factors that do contribute to the difference in response time between the state parks. And yes, keep in mind that time to patient from dispatch was only reported from 3 out of the 9 runs for, which one is it? From Adams Lake State Park, while time to scene was reported for all 9 runs. So that is why you see a discrepancy in those numbers for Adams Lake State Park. You see it doesn't really follow the same trend as the others, and that's why. Sometimes you just have missing data. And when you're dealing with smaller numbers, that can always be an issue. So my last table is looking at percentage of EMS runs for each agency that occurred within a select Ohio state park. So you remember from the previous slide, all the list of unique EMS agencies that actually responded to runs within these state parks. So for these agencies, how among all of the runs that they did in 2023 and 2024, how many of them actually occurred in the specified list of Ohio state parks? That's what this table shows. It's a pretty small percentage overall compared to the runs that they do within their own jurisdiction, but wanted to give you guys an accurate representation to the best of our ability of what the burden on this EMS agency was in terms of them responding to a state park incident. Yes, and keep in mind Hocking County Emergency Medical Services completed runs in both Hocking Hills and Tar Hollow state parks.
Only 2 agencies that had over 1% of their runs were Jerusalem and Green Perrysville. Is that right? Am I reading that right?
Yes.
Huh.
Now, again, keep in mind, these are runs that resulted in EMS transport. So it is
Okay.
possible they were coming for a twisted ankle or something like that where, maybe they're with their family, they were able to get transported to a car so they didn't need EMS transport back.
Okay.
They have a small number of runs from what you're going through in your data,
Yeah.
so.
And these are 2 years data.
Cumulative 2020 through
Right.
2024.
So looking at 47 for Hocking, that's for 2 years. That was the number, okay. I have a question about the previous slide. So if I'm understanding this, so if we look at Hocking, it was 17 minutes to get to the park, but 3 minutes to get to the patient at that point, correct?
No, so you're not doing a subtraction. It's not like that.
Okay.
So, and I should also clarify, when I say dispatch to scene versus dispatch to patient, those are 2 separate variables in EMSRs. Now, in terms of what the EMS unit on call is describing as scene versus patient, sometimes it's the same thing, sometimes it's a little different. But And so it's not necessarily that they arrive like, at the entrance of the state park versus getting to the patient. There is a little bit of variance of interpretation for the EMS member who actually entered in that data. But to answer your second question, it's not like it was 3 minutes more. You're not doing a subtraction like that. It's just, this is the median time. So the median response time from when the dispatch was notified to when the EMS unit arrived on scene at Hocking Hills Park, however that was defined by the EMS unit, is 17 minutes. Versus the time that dispatch notified Hocking Hills EMS to the time they actually physically arrived to the ailing patient is 20 minutes. I know it's not clear enough to just do like a quick subtraction, say it's always going to take 3 minutes longer to go to the patient versus the scene, is my point.
But in general, the delay is caused by getting to the park. Can we make that association from that? Because
My
of where
guess
they're
would be that the
located?
difference is, yes, I mean, if you have a larger state park, it could take
Right.
you longer. Or if there's something
Well,
very, very
driveways.
specific about the patient that takes them longer to get down, if they're down like a cliff or something. I'm not sure. Again, the only thing I'm trying to clarify is that when I say arrived at scene, that doesn't necessarily mean that EMS unit was like at the entrance of Hocking Hill, like with the sign that says
Right.
so, versus patient. That is slightly up to the interpretation of the EMS unit.
There would also be some variability amongst agencies on what they define as on scene. So it might be crossing the threshold or the gate of the park, or it may be near where the patient is located. So it all depends on what they use to define on scene.
I know these are medians, but the numbers are close enough that while certainly there are some instances where they arrive, it might take 45 minutes to get to the patient. Those must be relatively rare, or that would be a bigger gap.
Yeah.
And I wonder, Pat, I don't know if you know, the Mohican State Park, how many of those would be the juvenile facility embedded in the park? I know they've had a number of fire runs. So there's a privately owned juvenile rehab center in the middle of the park.
Yeah, certainly, depending on what addresses are used, it could include that data, for sure.
Anyway. Interesting data.
Yeah, it is. And again, the senator made a decent point. None of these parks are up on the islands, but we wouldn't expect a big discrepancy in the islands compared to these other parks. Because I think, Dan, if I remember correctly, I think the initial data that we were asking for were like the 4 highest use parks. So, and for like medium use, and then 4 of the lower use is what we asked for. So we wouldn't think that there'd be anything that would jump off the page with respect to the islands. Okay. Questions from the group? Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Boy, do we want to, I'm going to put a pin in that. I kind of want to discuss that for a little bit, but I also want to keep going with these presentations because I want to knock the presentations out. But we'll talk about it at the end. We'll talk about it at the end. All right, let's go. Bill, you're up.
Okay, thanks, Director. I offered to do a presentation when, which I was impressed with Chief Butler's presentation. He had put way more thought into solutions than what I had at this point. So I was kind of embarrassed when he went through his. But the one thing that kind of caught me, and he talked about, I think we got into a little sidebar about regional resource kind of management and allocation. So and that's why I kind of brought it up. We have that to a certain extent with fire and EMS in Ohio. So I offered to do the presentation. And along with that, I had mentioned, obviously we got Director Merrick from Ohio EMA. When we start talking about resource management, depending on an incident, whatever's going on in one of the state parks, they may or may not be involved. But when we talk about resource management and resource allocation, I don't think anybody does it better than Ohio EMA. And we work closely with them during the major events. So I thought it made sense if there were questions about that. I don't like speaking for state agencies, so I kind of suggested maybe we had a representative from Ohio EMA. So we're talking about the Ohio Fire Chief State Emergency Response System. So I'd also mentioned last meeting a couple of the applicable Ohio revised codes that we sort of work under or through. 9.60, 5502.29, and probably I would say probably one of the biggest ones is 5502.41. That affords us the protections and the coverage or the liability protection and the ability to respond throughout the state. And it kind of sets the groundwork for some potential reimbursement, but it's on a kind of a larger scale, I think, than what we're looking at most likely with majority of incidents in state parks. So why we exist, right? So I won't go through all these. And I will tell you, it's hard for me to scale this down to like 15 minutes because I could talk a couple hours on this very easily. But I know we don't have the time, so I kind of really tried to do a higher level. But anybody that's familiar remembers the one of the first Xenia tornadoes. I feel like they've hosted quite a few in Ohio. The big hazmat incident. Anybody in fire and EMS has always heard about the Miamisburg train derailment. A natural gas issue we had in McDonald, Ohio, overpressurization of a gas line. We had multiple structure fires at the same time. And I always say this, and Director, if I say something that's not, please step in. I would say that Shadyside seemed like it was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back, right? So the commonality between all these, not only are large scale, but it either involved large numbers of casualties, definitely large numbers of resources, and really the big thing in common is it overwhelmed the local entities and they needed to reach out for additional resources. And we just didn't have that mechanism in place prior to the response system. We could work through our local entities. We didn't really have anything regional. Obviously, if it was a larger scale that the state EOC was opened up, we kind of have that, but we just didn't have that mechanism in place. So formed a committee, and I know there was conversations between probably some local and some county officials as well as some state officials at the time, and I wasn't involved in this, so I guess I can't speak accurately to it, but it was determined that I think the mechanism to make this happen could more easily fall through the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association. So as we do with the association, we work by committees. We formed a committee, did a lot of research. We polled or we looked at plans that other states had. What did we think was applicable to Ohio? What did we think was going to work in Ohio? What wasn't going to work in Ohio? So we tried to create that system. It was formally adopted by the Chiefs Association in 2000. And that went live in August of 2002. And I know that sounds like a long time, but during that time period, not only were we building out support for the program, awareness and support, I'm talking to fire chiefs, township trustees, city council members, mayors, city managers, we were also building out the database. And it was always meant to be simple. We used to joke about fire chiefs helping fire chiefs. When you need help, you give us a call and we'll get you help. It was never meant to replace any other plan. And I would definitely say quite the opposite, as we can fit into other plans. We have been identified in some SOPs or some planning purposes when an incident has reached a scale that it can no longer be handled locally. We are definitely a resource where we can bring in a mechanism to bring in additional resources. And the nice thing about this, we talk about it, is it's kind of one system, whether it's a fast-paced emergent incident that's not going to last very long, or if it's an ongoing, and we have actually been engaged with incident commanders or EOCs for upwards of 96 hours. So we have that. We have a lot of redundancy built into our system. So this is just a snapshot, I think, from a couple months ago. And when I have the opportunity like this, I brag on Ohio's fire and EMS services because there's over $2 billion worth of resources that have been offered to be used when there's an incident within Ohio. Now, I will follow that up with right now, that doesn't mean if we needed them, we're not necessarily going to be able to get 888 fire engines because some of them are out of service, some of them are on their own incidents, and we do try to, we try not to overwhelm those coming in, so we want to leave, for those in the fire service, right, we want to leave resources out there that can help Mrs. Smith when her husband falls or her toaster catches on fire, because there's day-to-day incidents, that emergencies that are not going to stop because something major is going on. But that just tells you the level of commitment we have from our local resources. We work with, currently we've got 4 different what we call central dispatch agencies. They rotate on a regular basis. We always have one that's identified as primary and one that's backup. And if we need to, we can easily move, and we can easily move phone lines. So if, let's say Columbus Fire is the first one listed there, if they have a major event going on their own and we have an activation, we can transfer that to Hamilton County or Lucas County or the MEC Center if we need to. We actually had, as we were dealing with the pandemic, we actually had a mechanism in place where we could actually run it from a mobile home if we needed to try to isolate ourselves. Thank goodness we didn't need to do that. We definitely, we're big in collaboration, right? So I don't think we could be as successful as we do without those partnerships and the collaboration. And first and foremost is Commerce with the State Fire Marshal's Office. And definitely we've got a long-standing relationship with the Ohio Department of Public Safety. So Ohio EMA, Division of EMS, and even Homeland Security. And then we've always had a relationship with ODH. That was definitely strengthened during the pandemic too. So we had a lot of workings with them as they kind of took the lead, even though we were in the state EOCs. So we have that partnership as well. This is not all inclusive, but some recent activations I kind of like to cover because it shows what we can do, what we have done. And I will tell you that I think I've got a listing up here of our coordinators, and that sheet also has it. We follow the same 8 Homeland Security planning regions that the state does. And I will tell you that we have had responses in nearly 25 years in each one of those regions. So we've been all over the state. The most recent one was November of last year, had a partial building collapse in Mahoning County. So we were able to get some additional regional urban search and rescue teams up there. Athens County, so this is, we can do this. A lot of people I think kind of forget, not only can we help at the actual incident scene, we can help backfill when those resources in the area are depleted. So whether it's staffing a fire station or EMS station or providing resources. So in this case, I believe it was some sort of an outside fire, but they were utilizing water tenders because there weren't fire hydrants, overwhelmed like that county. So we brought in additional water tenders for them to backfill those fire stations. Circleville Fire Department with the fire in the hospital needed some additional EMS units. We got them for them. So this and the one September 24 doesn't sound, I think, just when you first look at it, if you don't have any familiarity with it, it doesn't sound like it was anything major, except that what I was told is this substation helped to supply a lot of the power on the east coast of the U.S. So kind of had a lot of significance there. We remember the tornadoes from 2024, so we were able to provide some support for the incident command structure as well as urban search and rescue teams. And it's amazing for anybody that was involved with that, how many structures, I feel like it was like almost 1,800 that I think they had certain. Now, it wasn't just the team that came in, but it was collaborating, working with the locals. And I think by like 5 that next night, they were able to search like if I'm not mistaken, like 1,800 structures looking for casualties. Tiltonsville had a line of duty death. We are a mechanism. The Ohio Fire Chiefs has a line of duty death committee. If anybody's familiar with the Federal Fallen Firefighters Foundation, it's the same as the local assistance state committee. So what they can do is not only help that local agency through that process of funeral visitation, those types of things. If they need bunting, they need equipment, bagpipers, honor guards, they can do that. But the other thing that they can do is we'll follow through with the public safety officers' benefits that could be available to the survivors. So they can do that. We didn't really have a good alerting mechanism. Now they can do it through the response system. The way, and I like to point out, the March 2020 is like, it was nothing really special other than this was right at the beginning of the pandemic. And I was really nervous. I didn't know what none of us did, right? We didn't know what we were going to, what are we going to be faced with the pandemic? I didn't know if fire chiefs were going to let their personnel and resources leave their jurisdictions or not. And this kind of was that moment where I was able to take a deep breath. Okay, I think it's going to be okay. We had a need somewhere. We were able to get them resources, so it went pretty good. I don't need to go through. Another Montgomery County, the tornadoes thing to kind of keep in mind here is we actually, those tornadoes damaged the local water distribution system. So water was an issue. So we were able to provide water tenders for them and actually engaged we were working as in the response system coordinators in the state EOC, and we were working directly with Montgomery County's EOC, and we stayed engaged with them for 96 hours, rotating out resources. So just simply, kind of our structure is each of our counties, we want to have at least one county coordinator. This is the person that we hope can be that liaison, keep the awareness going, keep the resources up to date, and work with their county dispatch center as well. Like I said, we follow each one of the regions. Normally, I think Region 2 right now, we only have one regional coordinator, but each one of these regions has 2 regional coordinators, and I will tell you that's the backbone of our system. Those are the people, I always kind of like to call them as the shakers and the movers, right? They know what's going on in a region. When we need to get some recon for an incident, or our regional coordinators will work with an incident commander as a liaison. These are the people that make it happen. There's kind of a quick glimpse of who we have. That sheet that I passed out also has, I believe it's got a QR code and a link that will go to our website. So if anybody's interested, wants to talk or communicate with any of these coordinators, you're more than welcome to use that to find out who they are. So one number, we talk about whatever the needs are, fire, EMS, hazmat, specialty teams. We'd already kind of mentioned that we've got the urban search and rescue teams. We have hazmat teams. We have Swiftwater search and rescue teams. One thing that was a big help in East Palestine is we have right now one incident management team identified. And I kind of relay that to the fire chiefs, to the incident commanders, right? These are teams, like they were able to come into East Palestine and help coordinate, sort of bring some order to a very complex incident. So they're not there to take over. They're there to work with the local incident commander to try to help coordinate the mitigation of that. Especially that one was so crazy, right? It just seemed like it kept sort of changing. That was kind of quick. It's hard for me to break that down in such a short time, but any questions that anybody has?
Bill, just a couple comments that I have. I saw this in action for the first time, and actually we had a request from our comms team for those of us sitting at the table to speak into the microphones. I was speaking that way earlier and speaking past the microphone. So I saw this in action for the first time up in East Palestine, and I wasn't overly familiar with it, but as I saw it work in the initial derailment phase and the 24 hours afterwards, it really is an incredible resource for the state and for our local first responders. And again, for those of you who don't know, the East Palestine train derailment was a huge event, but there was no private property damage. There was nobody injured. There was nobody killed. And I think that is a a direct reflection of the professionalism of the first responders who got to the scene, and then the coordination of all of the assets, because it was just overwhelming for the locals, and even to a certain extent to kind of the regional folks who were at least the adjacent county folks. So the surging of resources into that community to contain that situation and protect property and life was kind of amazing to watch. So.
It always is. And I should have mentioned, I don't have an accurate listing because since its inception in '02, we've gone through multiple platform changes. But we average, I like to say we average probably 2 to 3 responses in a year. We've had as many as 6. We've had a couple, we probably have had a 12-month period where we haven't had any. But in that time period, I think we're up to almost 75 activations in a quarter of a century. And the one thing I always brag on with our coordinators too is every time that 888 number has rung and somebody has needed help, we've been able to get them help. So we're pretty proud of that fact. Yes, ma'am.
So, but just to make the connection to state parks, I don't think there has been an activation through the Association for State
Hocking
Parks.
Hills.
But I mean, I think separately, we are very tied in with all of the local fire departments, whether it's for emergency response or fire response. We are the dispatcher for the state fire marshal. We, of course, we employ dozens of firefighters that are mostly wildfire firefighters that are frequently sent to other states at federal expense and respond on many of our properties, although not necessarily a state park. But I can't
depending on
recall there's been any activation.
Hocking Hills. We were there, the Hocking Hills for the lodge fire.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
that
that's
was-
the only one that comes to mind. And that is, so, what we're talking about here with this group is, especially like with those, most likely we wouldn't be involved with those EMS incidents that you saw unless it was some sort of a mass casualty or maybe there was some sort of maybe a rope rescue team, something special that local entity may not, or the ODNR officers may not have the capability of doing.
Excuse me, linkages with ferry boats and transportation up at South Pass Island. Just curious if that's ever been addressed. How is that being addressed? Is that a island plan, safety plan? Is there a plan? How do you
I'm not aware that
work
we
with-
specifically have addressed that. We will fall a lot of times if we go in somewhere on what's been already coordinated on a local level. I don't know that it's been issues. I know we've worked with Turnpike, like the Turnpike Commission. But I don't know, Director, I don't know if you have an idea on ferries or.
I was going to ask Sheriff Lavorchak if he's on. Sheriff Lavorchak, if you're still on, you can chime in. Otherwise, I'm going to kick it to Sema. But I would imagine that you guys are doing rehearsals and plans for ferry situations or ferry emergencies up there, I would think. No, the locals. I would imagine the locals are. But Sema, are you? I mean, you're up there.
Yeah.
So.
So, Sheriff, I don't know if you're still on, but I'll jump in and then you can correct me.
Sheriff calling me right now, so he must have got knocked off. So,
All right.
hey, Sheriff, I got you on speaker for everybody. How about that?
Yeah, sorry about that. I was trying to gather some information in regards to the squad calls and everything, and got bumped off the teams. I can hear you, but I can't speak. Yeah, so we do train with the ferries up here, and to be quite honest, I'll give you a direct example. Years ago, we had the terrace collapse at Lon's Winery, and that was a mass casualty incident. One dead, numerous injured, and transportation from the island was by, I believe there were 5 or 6 medical helicopters utilized, but also we utilized the Jet Express ferries and the Miller ferries to transport injured. And so, yeah, the ferry boats are utilized if necessary. But obviously, on normal incidents, they're utilized to transport the squad personnel back and forth to whether it's Magruder or Firelands Hospital. We also utilize the Coast Guard's vessels if necessary, plus our own vessels.
Hey, are you also doing some training on emergencies on the ferry boats, like fires or other incidents on the ferry boats?
We do. We train for fire EMS on the ferry boats, and to be quite honest, we're probably one of, if not the only SWAT team on the Great Lakes that trains on the ferry boats. My SWAT team actually boards at 30 knots from another vessel directly onto the back of the Jet Express.
Okay.
And it's extremely dangerous, but my guys train doing it. And so, yeah, we do train with the ferries also.
Okay. Any questions for the sheriff? Follow-up questions? All right, we don't have any questions for you right now. Hey, listen, just hang in there. If
I'm listening.
if you want to talk, I'm gonna have you do the same thing. I'm gonna have you just call me back, and I'll answer it
Perfect.
that way. Sound good? And then you said you're in the process of looking up EMS run data for up on the
Yeah,
islands.
I was trying to look it up. I looked at it. We're probably close to in line, but the biggest thing to remember is when it comes to the EMS data for ours, well, again, we're very unique. A squad doesn't just drive from another village or another city to that call. South Bass Island, Put-in-Bay Township, is contracted with Put-in-Bay for EMS, so they're right there on South Bass Island. It's a limited number of squad members, obviously, since it's an island. Fire personnel is extremely limited. When we go to Middle Bass Island, the fire department there is even more limited, and EMS is more limited. And then we have a state park at North Bass Island, which now has cottages. The state's running out, and there is 0 fire and 0 EMS on site over there, so they have to transport over there.
Okay. Okay.
It's an extremely unique situation from anywhere else in the state of Ohio.
It is absolutely so. All right, Sheriff. Thank you. Hang in there. Like
Yes,
I
sir.
said, I'll keep this phone handy, and if you got feedback or information, just hit me up.
Thanks, sir.
All right. Thanks. Hey, Bill, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Your the 888 number. Is that well known? So I come from the law enforcement background. It always amazed me a lot of times when I came over here to the state. I'd go back and I'd talk to some of the township officers I knew or some of the smaller department officers I knew, and there just wasn't a lot of awareness of some of the assets or resources that were available at the state. So how are we doing with respect to?
I mean, it gets out to each county. We do multiple presentations throughout the year, and our regional coordinators do communicate with our county coordinators. Unfortunately, we do have changeover sometimes of those county dispatch agencies, and there may be, I guess, a reduced awareness, but we can usually kind of work through that fairly quickly.
Thank you, Chief. Does anybody else have other questions? And
Yes, we've got one.
okay.
Pat's got one.
So you mentioned the financial incentive. So does the association pay for incentive for entities to opt in, or is that only after the fact if there's any money available for
That's
disasters?
where, and Director Merrick, you have to sort of step up. 550241, the IMAC kind of sets that up, and I believe there's some exceptions related to hazmat incidents, but I believe it's the first 8 hours of an incident is non-billable. Does that sound right? 8 or 12? And that's an agreement that is worked out between entity and entity. So I know Ohio EMA doesn't necessarily get involved with that. You don't manage it, but
Yeah, I'm gonna let Mike take a stab at it. I don't know that off the top of my head.
Neither do I, but it is specified in IMAC in terms of like what the billable hours is. It's kind of a framework that, again, can get superseded by specific mutual aid agreements that are arranged locally. So, I mean, again, you could have a situation where there's a local township that works with the county and they come up with some other agreement. But there is kind of a skeleton that kind of establishes a universal framework across the state that how reimbursement would work and under different circumstances. And then there's the opportunity there if somebody wants to try to get reimbursed or just kind of waive it and say, hey, that was a good training opportunity, or we're willing to help you out. That's something they can do too.
So if it's outside of that, like that local entity agreement, is that state funding that comes in to reimburse them, or where does that come from?
So this is kind of where it gets complicated because it's thresholds in the event, right? So if it's local to local, generally that's being held that way and not reimbursed from the state. But when you meet that certain threshold, and we won't even talk about the federal thresholds because we have such a high threshold in Ohio, we don't meet that very often unless it's multi-county and almost statewide. But for the state disaster relief program, those are the kinds of things that can come in once those thresholds are met. So recently, with the snowstorm, and I'll be very brief, we don't count state agencies in our count unless we're going to go for a federal declaration. Then we can count them in, but we can't pay state to state. So if Director Mertz, if you all have a response, we're coming out of the same pot of money, kind of, if we go in and ask for money at the controlling board. So that's kind of why we don't use that at the state disaster. Now, we will for state emergency operations work, because that is covered under that. As far as local to local, it's kind of a lot to manage because they have to know their thresholds and where they're going to get that funding, Pat. And we have been a resource to help people figure that out. I can't remember a time that it has come to us when it's been a local to a local.
Okay.
That's a great question.
Yeah, thank you.
The other part of that, and I know I mentioned in the 550241 potential reimbursement, the other thing that it does for us as first responders is it allows us to work together as a team. So, for instance, our Swiftwater Search and Rescue team, our hazmat urban search and rescue teams, none of those, the numbers of personnel and the cadre of equipment is so large that we don't have any agency in Ohio that can do that on their own. So 550241 allows us to work together in those teams from multiple agencies. Allows us, we've worked together with ODNR sometimes with Swift, right? So it allows us to do that. It also allows us to work with our, I think our higher education facilities in Ohio as well.
Keep us on schedule
We're
here.
good?
So thank you very
Okay.
much, Chief. Thank you very much. And so let's go ahead. We're almost on time and hear from Melinda Huntley on from the travel perspective, the economic perspective.
I will fly through this to try to get us back on track because I know the conversations we want to have are really important. So I don't want to dip into that time too much. So this is a complete different a shift in messaging, but I think it's very important for us to understand the value that Ohio State Parks brings to local communities. And in that, what do travelers bring in value to local communities? Because we've talked a lot about, tapping into tourism funds. We've talked about lodging tax. We've talked about convention and visitors bureaus, which, let me just say now, will be summarized as CVB. So if you see CVB, that's what that means, because it was way too long to type. So what I'm going to do is fly through this material. You have the deck. You can look at the details and contact me later. But to start off on the same page, understand safety is a priority. It's not an either-or situation. We know that safety is vital because our visitors depend on safe parks and safe roads and fast emergency response. But we also know that visitors are already paying into local governments. And so it's being able to tell both sides of the story so you understand the balance that we're maintaining. I also like to start off by defining tourism because people have different impressions of what that is. National definition, international definition, travel 50 miles or more one way for business or leisure. So we're not talking long haul. We're not talking 1 week, 2 week. It's not all about large groups of people. We're talking about what happens when I go visit Northwest Ohio. Right? And I spend the day, and I go to mommy, and then I go to lunch, whatever that may entail. So 50 miles or more one way. We're not talking about everyone coming. out of state. So if we want to talk about and understand the value Ohio State Park visitors bring to their local communities, we have to understand the value of tourism in general and understand how that their dollars flow. Because what travelers do is they bring new dollars to a community. It's not the same $20 bill rotating throughout your community. It's bringing new $20 bills that you can, build community wealth through. And this is just a quick summary: 242 million visitors in Ohio in 2024, and a quick summary of some of the benefits. It's a community funding engine. When we bring in visitors, they spend money. $57 billion in direct and indirect spending was generated in 2024. 443,000 employees, $4.7 billion in state and local taxes. And I'll dig deeper. What you need to understand is that without those dollars coming in, without that spending coming in, the taxes being paid by these visitors, each and every household in Ohio would have to spend an additional $983 in taxes to replace just the existing services we have. So it's important that we understand that a drop in visitors isn't just a drop in hotel revenues or restaurant revenues. It can also shift costs back on residents. Not all visitors are the same, but Ohio State Parks outdoor recreation is a huge percentage, particularly of those that want to spend the night. Visitors spend 3 times the amount when they're overnight visitors versus day visitors. And the chart shows that national and state parks, people who come to Ohio for whatever reason, 8% of them go to a state park or a national park. But when it jumps to an overnight stay, those visitors, 51%, will visit a state park or a national park. So their state parks are a really key component of the tourism industry for extending that length of stay. 242 million visitors, the amount of money they spend directly, that's like if I'm in Northwest Ohio, I go to a restaurant, I buy a meal, right? That is direct spend. I stay at Maumee Bay State Park, that is a direct spend. $43.7 billion is exchanged between visitors and Ohio businesses directly, right? That's the first layer, just that direct expenditure. If we look at Ohio State Parks, look, the visitors that come to Ohio State Parks spend equivalent to $1.1 million every day, because they generate $392 million of spending. This data is from 2023, I believe. Isn't that correct, Director? Okay, we'll make sure. And the tax, local and state taxes, 39.3. These dollars aren't being spent at the state park alone, mind you, right? If you look at that chart, majority, well, not majority, but 40% are spent in local shops, retail shops. Then you get, dining, that's huge. Entertainment, recreation, then lodging. So that is where the dollars are being spent. They're not coming in and just supporting state parks. They're coming in and supporting your local bowling alley, your restaurants, your retail shops, and everything else. I like to say this is my favorite one because this is the part that most people don't really understand. That restaurant I go to needs to buy supplies in order to operate. The more customers they have, the more they're going to spend. And in Ohio, $13.3 billion additional dollars are spent by the businesses in the tourism industry to buy the goods and services they need. That is when you add that direct spend to this, you get the $57 billion impact. These are folks who, they're spending money in office supplies. They're spending money in accountants. I spoke at a chamber one time, and I remember it was a breakfast. And a woman came up to me afterwards, and she said, I didn't really think you had anything of interest to say to me. Like, I have an office supply store. And I was like, I'm just coming for the, free pancakes. And then she said, But I sat there and realized a third of my customers are hotels and restaurants, right? And all these businesses you've talked about that depend on travelers. She said, I need to pay more attention to what's going on because a third of my business also depends on having travelers. So I'm not going to talk too much about the jobs, except that this is my, I could talk for hours on this one. We hear a lot about the jobs. It's because when we travel, who do we see? We see the front line. That's who's top of mind, right? Our job in this industry is to offer seamless experiences. That's what we do. So the curtain is drawn. If we walked up to a hotel, checking in and saw accountant calculating P&Ls, kind of ruined the experience for us, wouldn't it? We'd feel like we were back at work. The reality is over 50% of Ohio's tourism jobs are career professionals, full-time, right, professionals in all these different types of jobs. And when we look at our frontline jobs, where would we be if people didn't have an opportunity for work experience? We provide that opportunity. They may not stay in our industry, but they get the soft skills they need to go on and serve in other careers. There was a longitudinal study, studied people who started in the tourism industry, traced them for 30 years. And they discovered that those who began careers in the tourism industry ended up making more money than those who started in any other industry, other than, I think it was finance, right? They didn't stay in the industry, they went elsewhere, but they had more successful careers because they learned work ethic and they learned how to deal with people. So those are the values of those jobs. Fewer visitors, less spending, fewer shifts, fewer hours, and fewer local paychecks. So the other benefit, the last benefit I'll talk to in this, how it starts supporting communities, is also what's called the halo effect. It's understanding that people out there have perceptions of Ohio. They have perceptions of your local communities right now. And if you don't show them something else, they hold on to those perceptions. I did focus groups throughout the Midwest several years ago on perception of Lake Erie. And overwhelmingly, people thought it was all industrial, right? That the water quality was terrible, except for one place. Anybody have an idea where they might have thought the water quality was good? No. Bring it in closer. Cedar Point, right? It wasn't because Cedar Point had a huge filtration system built around it, but Cedar Point at the time was outspending the state of Ohio in tourism marketing 10-1. And they just built a coaster. So what pictures were they showing in Indianapolis and in Pittsburgh and Chicago? They were showing sparkling blue water. So it's built, perceptions are built on what you see. And we find that when we promote a community, and particularly when they visit, it changes people's perceptions on that community as a place to invest in a business, as a place to live, as a place to go to school, all these other economic goals. So when we go out there and promote a community, it's more than getting them just to visit our community. It's giving them an idea, a future, envisioning themselves in our location. So I did a little research because one of the things we haven't addressed is that there are already lodging taxes and other taxes being used to support public services. And I think this is really important that you understand this money is going to these different local governments. This is conservative. Nearly $95 million of tourism taxes already fund local governments in just the counties with a state park. It's very conservative because I didn't include the 4 state parks that span multiple counties. I didn't think that was fair, right? So one county or one state park touches like 6 different counties. I didn't think that was fair. I just looked at the ones I could isolate as being in a county. The first column, the county taxes, that is minus the Convention and Visitors Bureau portion. So they're getting $22.5 million In lodging taxes, they're investing in sports parks, convention centers, right? All these other different infrastructure projects that they think, are going to drive additional visitation. 22.3 are going to municipal, 20.8 township, 1.4 village. Plus, we have admission taxes. And if I looked at the admission taxes within those counties, 25.1 million. And the village of Put in Bay, village of Kelly's Island, and Put in Bay Township receive 1.97 million in taxes with the intent to support public services. Any questions about this one? Because I know this one's kind of complicated.
Yeah, let me ask a question on that.
Sure.
We talked about this, and I can't remember where you were on that. We had a discussion early on that we may not be as efficient or effective in actually collecting those taxes.
In some cases, yes.
Okay.
And that's county. That you have to look at the county and the local governments because the state doesn't collect these.
Right.
So, yes, I know that for a fact.
This is what is collected.
Right, that's what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that may be
This
a
is
portion
so
of, that's a portion
conservative.
of what's available.
Oh, it's so conservative. And I can tell you, so how I developed this is I did look at the Department of Taxation. I also looked at GuideStar reports, the Ohio Auditor reports in 990s of the Visitors Bureaus, right, and was able to develop this. But I then went back and looked at the Department of Taxation report, compared that to actual receipts I received from county auditor's office, and it was woefully low. What was being shown at the state report was about 2/3, right, of what was actually collected. So I know this is very, very conservative, and I'm going to continue to dig into that and see if we can, figure out where the discrepancy is. But you're correct. The collections, it's up to those local communities to collect those taxes, and if they're not enforcing it, right?
Right. That's, again, I don't want to go spiraling out of control
Right,
now.
exactly.
But what I'm about to say is I just have a problem if a local entity is not collecting taxes that are available for their coffers, but yet they are asking us to fund these resources to go into state parks. I mean, fundamentally, that seems like it's not right. And that's Andy Wilson popping off at the mouth, but
So, Director, I think there's also, this slide is great, and it does show what's being collected, at least for lodging taxes, and that's the primary one for, I would say, for townships. But what this doesn't show is that not all of those townships that surround state parks that are providing the services to state parks have hotels.
right.
So, case in point, Deer Creek State Park is not directly on State Route 71. You get off of 71 to go over to Deer Creek. Deer Creek, those townships around it, they don't have the hotels. It's the township that's close to the interstate, or it's the village or city that's close to the interstate that has the hotel. So those entities are getting the lodging taxes, not the township directly associated with the state park. So I just want to make sure, I mean, yes, the number is there, 20 million that are going to townships statewide for lodging taxes. But, no, I'm looking at the township portion. I'm just saying, but for townships that, this is saying that in counties that have state parks, 20 million is
gap,
going to
right.
townships. But that's not accurately pinpointing exactly where this revenue is coming from and going. And I think it's just, I just want to make sure we're making sure,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that we're, understanding that just because an entity has a lodging tax doesn't necessarily mean they have a state park in their jurisdiction, and it also doesn't necessarily mean that they actually have fire and EMS and they're the ones providing the services. So it's just, this is a good number, but it doesn't directly correlate with all of the entities that either do or do not have lodging facilities and either do or do not provide fire and EMS to the parks.
No, and that's great. That's a great comment, and I think we need to do more research to figure out what is that, right? What is that number? When I started looking at this, I wasn't just gonna come out and say, this is the number. I was like, no, I dug into it, right? I was able to take those state parks, correlate it to this, and come up with the data. This is defendable, right? So let's look at which ones are being left out, and how many they are, and what kind of problem is that? So, no, I think it's a great comment.
But my follow-up question to that is, and I get that, I understand that that's an issue. But in those situations, so let's say I'm a township that has a state park but I don't have a hotel. The law enforcement response into that park is going to be handled either by ODNR or the county sheriff. So that for the
It could be
For the
or it
most
could
part.
not be. I mean, you have, if you go up to the islands, those are townships that actually have police departments. Like, there are townships that have police departments that do help respond to some of those state parks. Okay, so.
What islands? What islands?
that's Sheriff Lavorchak.
Is it,
Because Put-in-Bay Township is handled by my office.
okay, so, let's not say islands. I'm sorry? I'm talking about, like, is it what's the
That's
one?
not the island.
It's not the islands, it's a near, yeah, I'm sorry, not the islands, up there in Northwest Ohio. You know, you do have townships that actually have police departments, so it's not always
Correct.
gonna be the sheriff's office. But
Correct.
for the most part, I would say it's gonna be the sheriff, but that's not only the case.
Right.
I would agree with that 100%. Just an example here in Ottawa County, and I talked about this when I had my presentation. East Harbor State Park is within Danbury Township. They have a police department. Catawba Island State Park is within Catawba Island Township. They have a police department. They service those state parks. Now, East Harbor does have state park officers who handle East Harbor full-time. Catawba does not, so they're handled by the East Harbor folks that go over there or the Catawba Island Township Police Department. The state park on Southwest Island is handled by my office, but we are contracted through the township. So the township is the one footing the cost. They're paying the cost, even though it's my deputies that are responding. So I think you're absolutely right. It's the township is bearing a very large burden there. When we speak about the tourism and marketing, I think that's crucial. But I also think it's crucial to remember that sometimes we're overburdening the local resources because the local law enforcement, fire, EMS, infrastructure, everything sometimes is not built for that. And I'm going to use Ottawa County as an example. Ottawa County, for 6 months of the year, is at 41,000 people. The other 6 months, we're no less than 200,000 every day. On the weekends, we go to 350,000. And on the holiday weekends, we go to 500,000. We're built for 41,000. And it taxes our local resources incredibly. So I think marketing is terribly important, but I think also we have to remember that we have to provide for the safety and security of the people who are coming to these state parks and to these areas. So I think there should be a shared cost amongst marketing, also providing safety and security forces.
And again, I agree with that. I with the point that Melinda's making here, I just see, first of all, I would think that a lot of the townships up in the islands are townships that do have hotels and lodging in them. I could be wrong, again, but I would think that those funds would be available to them. I think across the state, when you talk about townships that don't have hotels in them or the ability to access lodging taxes, those are ones where I would, again, think more than likely it's the county sheriff providing a lot of that. I could be wrong, but which then takes me to the majority of the cost that is going to be borne with respect to emergencies in state parks in those townships is going to be fire EMS, because a lot of those townships, a lot of townships have fire and EMS that don't have police department.
That is, you know, the fire and EMS side is the bigger side for townships. But to the point of, you know, entities that have hotels, I'll say, which this is totally off subject, but it's providing you light or insight into what this means. So municipalities control water and sewer for the most part in the state of Ohio. And because municipalities control water and sewer, they, for the most part, control where development goes. If you have a county-wide water or sewer program, then yes, you're gonna have more townships that have the ability to have a hotel without any question. But when you are in a county where the municipalities are controlling the water and sewer, they want those hotels in their jurisdiction because they benefit from the money. So I would like to think that all of the townships near the islands or in Northeast Ohio that are like, if it's Cedar Point or you said, Sheriff, whatever the state park is you just said, you know, that's actually on the mainland. Yes, I would hope that they would have hotels, but if they don't have access to water and sewer, then they don't get to build those hotels, and the city or village nearby is going to have those hotels.
Again, I think what we need to do is identify the data, because Danbury Township, I just looked up, does get lodging tax, right? Baytown, I mean, all of those townships up there do get funding that is generated from this, and they don't all have hotels.
Well, and I
They
just wanna-
give money to some of the other communities, so.
And I just want to make sure we're not, yes, the islands area is important, but we're also talking about state parks statewide, right? It's not just the island area. So yes, you know, those areas up there, they have it. And some of them are even collecting on short-term rentals because those short-term rental folks are paying, and that's great. But we still don't have state law forcing short-term rentals to pay the CVB fee, which we would love for that to happen, the lodging tax fee. And again, teeth in the enforcement process of collecting the lodging tax so that locals have some teeth to force those entities to pay.
I want to make one more point off this. So let's go back to Deer Creek. I don't know this for sure, but I can almost guarantee the primary law enforcement response into Deer Creek is the Madison County or Pickaway County, or it's like 3 counties, and DNR. Yeah.
And again, we're not just talking police, it's the other safety services
So
as well.
that's you're walking right to the point that I want to make.
Yes.
So the townships are bearing the brunt of the fire and EMS. When you look at those numbers that we first started with, those actually are very minuscule numbers.
But those are transports only, and I think that was said in the presentation, that's transport only. There is a cost when that vehicle leaves the station, right? Or if they go and they train, or if they go and help somebody with a sprain and they get them on their way. I mean, there is still a cost for that unit to leave the station to go help. So
But
we
aren't
were only
those-
talking about transport in those numbers.
Aren't some of those incidents those going to be treated by DNR law enforcement? They're going to address it, right? So I think it's a lot of assumptions that we're throwing, like, right, about this could happen. We heard from the sheriff, right, about the incidences there. You know, when they were called, it was because DNR law enforcement weren't available. But the rest of them we were able to see. So I think what we need is data. We need to prove some of these points versus assuming, right? Because that's a dangerous road to go down.
I'm going to come back to you in 1 second, but I want to hit Chief Burns real quick. Chief?
After Dan's presentation, I went back to my own department and had some information sent up. 18.6% of all my call volume is refusals. So, and there is a cost. Even if there is a cost when there is a refusal, it costs my department $685 per response. So, you know, if you're responding to a state park, 28 times, you know, and getting refusals, that's 685, and that's just my you know, my small department's cost. I can't imagine what Athens County's cost is per call.
But I think the data we've seen and heard, first I want to dispel the myth. I mean, the reason we're doing this is not because we have an extraordinary public safety problem at state parks, right? We don't. It's like anywhere else. This, you know, we don't have an extraordinarily high number of people who are having heart attacks or getting hurt. We don't have an extraordinarily high number of fire runs or arrests or crimes. I mean, we are similar to other places. So we're not here to solve a public safety problem at state parks. It's to understand, you know, what are the burdens on the local services and how can we help with that? And I think Melinda's point, and maybe what we need to look at the data and how the money is distributed, like these state parks create a huge amount of money in these communities. Maybe it's not fairly shelled out. That you know, you know, I'm not going to dispute that because we don't have it broken down that way. But there is excess money generated that should be used in some fashion to meet these burdens. So, I mean, just as a starting point, it's not like our problem is these places are unsafe or unwieldy in terms of calls. And in fact, we provide a pretty big safety force to take care of the majority of the things that happen. It's all the extra stuff, and we don't want to be a burden. We want to be the people that are providing all this extra money. And maybe how we distribute it is going to be a longer conversation someday, but, you know, I don't know.
I appreciate
let
that.
Melinda
No, you're
finish her
you're totally right, and that's I've said it
presentation?
before. I'm very concerned that the conversation leads to an opinion that our public parks are unsafe, and what I've seen and heard is counter to that. I mean, we've got an amazing state park system, and it is generating this much, you know, at minimum into local governments. So what they do with it, I can't speak to that, but I can speak to this is what's generated. Senator, you have a question?
If I could interrupt real quick, my take on this was that part of the reason for this entire committee or this gathering was because of the local law enforcement's involvement in the state parks and a number of times that we're being called to handle calls within the state parks because the state, the DNR safety forces aren't always available at those state parks. That's what I thought this whole thing was about. Maybe I was mistaken. And I will tell you that the numbers at South Bass Island show that. Many of the other state parks do not. East Harbor, I would say probably 90 to 95% of the calls there are handled by ODNR, absolutely. But when it comes to the islands, that has not been the case. It's not traditional. And that's when I was asked to be on this committee by the director, that was part of the reason, from what I understood, why we were having these meetings. So I think personally, I don't, where this last conversation was going, I'm not certain.
Yeah, but in fact, I'm looking at Pat there. I think most of the calls on South Bass are handled by our officers. The calls that the sheriffs, you guys handle are very important, and I'm
No,
not-
I would disagree with that. I would absolutely disagree with that. I don't think most of the calls on South Bass Island State Park are handled by your guys because throughout the week, my deputies are there throughout the week. Your folks have been there on the weekends, and not so much during the week. I don't know that I would agree with that. I think if you looked at those numbers that the colonel gave, those numbers were skewed, and I think we talked about that during the meeting, that many of those were administrative calls. So I think it's a shared amount. I'm not saying we handle more, but I think it's a pretty shared amount. And I think it's fair to say that. And I'm not trying to take away anything from ODNR, but at the same time, we do handle a lot of calls in the state park at South Bass Island.
So we will pull those numbers and bring them to the final meeting, but. Yeah.
Senator, do you have a question before I?
Yeah, no, and thank
Try
you
to-
for that clarification, Sheriff Lavorchak. And I think this group was put together because of an amendment I put in the budget that requested, just for the islands, reimbursement for runs to the state parks. because of the burdens that we have and the unique challenges we have. We don't have a neighboring community that can come and help. Sheriff Lavorchek does a really great job, but the locals are the ones that are paying to reimburse the sheriff for runs he's making to the state parks. And so we were trying to find a way to help fund safety services. There are roughly 600 residents of the Bass Islands, and they are the ones tasked with providing the resources to make sure that the islands are safe for our tourists, because nothing's going to kill tourism quicker than a major incident. So we are working hard to make sure that we are ready for any incident, that we have the resources necessary to respond. I know in years past it's taken sometimes 2 to 3 hours to get the SWAT team to the islands, and we just want to make sure we're doing everything we can to keep our tourist areas and certainly the islands that I represent safe. And I can't thank Sheriff Lavorchek enough for all his hard work and dedication to making that happen. But it is a burden on the 600 residents. It's a burden that we're trying to make sure we have the resources to create a safe environment.
And I can
And
make
just
sure
to
you have
clar-
the
just to-
breakdown of the monies that are going to those local governments for services.
And just, if I can clarify that also, our SWAT teams never had to go to the state park. That's been for the village, that's been in the village.
Oh, thank you, Sheriff.
That's the point that I wanted to make.
Yes.
If we're really talking about public safety on the islands, the majority of the issues aren't in the state parks.
Correct.
So yeah, we're in this strange position when you actually look at some of these numbers, in the context of all of public safety, we're really kind of talking about small numbers of actual responses. So while we need to do it better, while we need to do it more efficiently, while everybody needs to bear their burden, we need to make sure that we are addressing the actual problem, which is state parks, and not the overall problem of public safety on the islands. That's a different conversation for DNR.
And if I may, the amendment really was just for reimbursement to calls on the state park property and not the village or anything else. And the SWAT team response time, yes, it didn't happen on the state park, but that's just an example of what could happen if there's an incident on the state park. And so how can we better allocate our resources, or making sure that, what can we do better to make sure that we've got the resources on these islands to address any kind of critical need, because one incident I just can't have that on my watch.
And Melinda, you made a great point when you talk about marketing of the parks, and the director said this as well. Like, there is nothing in any way, shape, or form to indicate that we've got a public safety problem in our parks. So that nobody who's watching this should construe anything we say as that. What we're looking at is how we can more effectively and efficiently work together to basically address some of these issues with cost allocation and what that looks like. So
Okay, I'm gonna jump in and finish real
please,
quickly.
yeah,
This one.
sorry, took way too much of your time. Yep, thank you.
I didn't want to stop y'all. I was like, keep going. Somebody take notes. And I agree, right? Like, you've seen the numbers. I showed you that direct spend. It's going to businesses. The indirect, it's supporting others, non-tourism, right? There are benefits to bringing people to town. Huge benefits. Imagine a world where you didn't invite anybody that wasn't from your neighborhood. That's not realistic, right? So you need those other dollars to support that economy. Without tourism, we would not be in this room when we're talking South Bass Island, because it wouldn't be South Bass Island. It wouldn't, imagine if they had no visitors, they'd have no businesses, right? So I think what we need to do is understand there's a balance, because the lodging tax works when it's reinvested in this cycle of driving visitor spending. It's like if we sell the engine to pay for gas, right? Because that's what we're talking about when we talk about diverting dollars that should be used to continue this cycle of growth. I'm not going to go into a whole bunch of all these slides. You've got them. It kind of lays out the argument. But if you're not in the marketplace, if people aren't seeing your community, someone else is going to grab that business, guaranteed. And you're going to lose out on that. The other thing to understand is most CVBs with state parks are small. They're minuscule, right? What is it? 28% have budgets, full budgets less than 100,000. 58% have budgets that are less than 500,000. These are small. They're not like, taking all that lodging tax. No. Those that are larger, 20% or larger, except for a few exceptions, they're in markets where they're relying on conventions and conferences, right? There may be urban markets that, look, state parks isn't their driver. They're not driving necessarily the people to the state parks. Their funds are going to bring in more conferences, conventions, sporting tournaments into Ohio. There's a cost when we divert the lodging tax, right? And if you don't believe it, like, ask your local CVB about return on investment, because we measure it. We know that for every dollar Tourism Ohio spends on marketing, the state gets $5.27 in sales tax. So this isn't necessarily something that takes money away. It is an engine to make more money. And I love this example. People think, well, we don't need to market because we're great, right? That's what Colorado thought. And they cut their budget to zero because they're like, we don't need to market. We're great. We have mountains. We're fabulous. Everyone knows about us. No, they didn't. They lost $1.4 billion every year, and it took them 21 years to recover. 21 years. So the ability to market, even your community, is important. And when we make decisions, we've got to figure out, is it likely to be a net loss? Because, who was saying, well, we need tourism funds to do this. Great. What's the net loss that's going to occur? Because remember that chart with all those taxes that are going to local communities? Fewer people mean less dollars. Less lodging tax dollars, less admission, less sales, right? Less resort tax. We all depend on a thriving economy. And tourism is one piece of the economy. So I just ask for people to use caution instead of thinking, let them pay for it, right? There is a cost to that, and it could end up being a net loss. Other ways tourism's already a partner, I think is worth mentioning. We provide sponsorship dollars for a lot of events that are being held, particularly for safety. I know one state park gets all their security funding, extra security funding for an event from a CVB who has said, let me help you, right? There's strategic communications we could do, to divert congestion. There's a problem at one park. Work with the Visitors Bureau on messaging to get them to go to another. How many work with a local CVB at their state, right? Their local CVB. In safety messaging, I'm going to guarantee very few, right? Have you gone to them and said, help me with this? We've got this issue coming up, or we've got this park that's maybe a trail's closed. How can we divert congestion? So there's also amplifying safety messaging, right? You name it. Steering people to different seasons. I mean, I worked up on the Lake Erie area and started working on birding, right? Now, this isn't safety, but it's talking about what messaging can do. We could have marketed McGee Marsh, but what would I have done? Provided congestion, right, on those trails and damaged that area. We didn't. We reached out to 4, then 8 different other counties and said, find your best birding areas, and worked with ODNR and created the Lake Erie Birding Trail. So it eases the congestion. These are the types of conversations, if we're really talking about how to work and how to work collaboratively. My recommendations for the working group is what I've said before, create a toolbox for those who want to provide a safety grant program similar to Hawking. It should be voluntary, completely voluntary, because as you can see, the problem isn't widespread. It's just a few areas, and we always go back to these two areas. And I don't think we should be making policy statewide on two individual places. Partner with safety issues. I invite you to reach out to them. I'm happy to pull some meetings together. Short-term rentals, we talked about that. Grow the pie. And, make sure we have parity, that we're keeping up to speed with modern times, and that we're generating additional revenue. Support the CVB's efforts to extend the length of stay. This is going to generate additional revenue for local governments, as well as to drive the visitation. I think increasing GRF for more law enforcement at DNR is really important. The sheriff mentioned, 40% of the calls that he shared were due to ODNR not being around. And it's not necessarily because they were off doing other things. I mean, it's because they just didn't have enough people up there. Will we ever have enough law enforcement at parks? Probably not. But we could do better. We could use more. And I don't think requiring reimbursement from ODNR is an answer, because I don't see the numbers to support this. We've mentioned that, and I think it sets a really bad precedent, because I guarantee there's a super Walmart out there that has more visitation than many of our state parks. So, all right. Thank you.
Melinda, thank you. One real quick question for you.
Yeah.
When we talk about the data, that granular data,
Yes.
with respect to who's getting what monies, who's the keeper of that? Where do we?
County auditors.
Okay. Okay.
They would have the receipts.
All right. Any questions? All right.
I want to clarify one, just for clarification. I think it's 40% of the sheriff department calls for South Pass Island State Park. So of the calls they got for the state park,
Correct.
some of them were because law enforcement, ODNR officials weren't available. Some of them, I assume, were mutual support at an event that officers were already at. So I just wanted to.
No.
make sure it wasn't.
Valid.
Okay. All right. Let's see what time we got. You did great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, let's roll into talking about some of these potential recommendations. I'm going to start with what I think is an easy one. We had a presentation during this working group about the Drone as a First Responder program. And after we talked about that, there was some interest in potentially running a couple pilots in the state parks. And as we talked about it a little bit more, there was a lot of, I'll say, excitement about the potential for this use. And the folks, the experts in the DFR, the Drone as First Responder community that we talked to, as we talked to about state parks, they're like, look, as we haven't really thought about state parks too much, but that is probably one of the best use cases for DFR that we can imagine. Which makes sense, because you're talking about remote areas, you're talking about areas where there may not be roads or easy access to people, you're talking about long distances, and you're talking about less than urban areas where you have fire EMS maybe more readily available. So we talked and we discussed the potential of trying to set up a couple pilot programs. We think the islands would be a great location. Senator Gavarone and I had a conversation in between where somebody had raised the issue at the islands of the safety with respect to planes coming in and out of the airport. And whoever was talking to the senator about it was like, look, this is just not going to work up here because there's so many planes. So we actually went back to some of the experts in the field based on that conversation, kind of asked, hey, look, I can't imagine that as you survey the country and the world, there aren't tourist areas where they're using drones in this capacity or something that looks like that. What safety features are there? So they got back with us, and again, it varies, I think, from vendor, but these drone as a first responder programs have built-in safety mechanisms or measures to avoid collisions with aircraft. So do we have a slide on this, Brett? Okay. So the drone as a first responder box has a ground radar associated with it. So go ahead and give me the next slide. So that ground radar has a 5-mile basically circumference around the box where it tracks incoming and outgoing aircraft. Now, this is a legitimate problem up the islands because the islands have about 15,000 flights in and out of that airport on South Bass every year.
Helicopters and parasailers.
Right. So all of the above. So because this is radar, it picks up everything in that 5-mile radius. So the pilot, so when that call goes up, the pilot sitting at that station instantly gets access to what aircraft are around that drone at the time and can fly the aircraft accordingly. Go ahead and give me the next slide if you would. All right. So the pilot gets all kinds of alerts when the drone comes or when there's other aircraft in the area. The drone itself actually has collision avoidance built into it. So if an aircraft gets within a half mile of the drone and with 800 feet of elevation, it will drop. It'll drop, I think, to 100 feet. So the drone itself has anti-collision capability inside of it. So not only do you have the pilot watching it, but you got the drone.
Director, are you envisioning this is a program you would provide to the South Bass Island, police department to use to make it easier for them to respond?
I think the Ottawa County Sheriff's Office would be probably the best pilot for it. Can I get that next slide? Let me see I think there's one more slide here. Give me the next one. That's what I wanted right there. So we asked them to overlay the capability of that drone on the islands. So that is putting it basically at the Put-in-Bay Police Department. So that's actually having the launch site at the Put-in-Bay Police Department. Again, I think the Sheriff's Office, ODNR would all need access to it, but that shows you what that would cover. And as we were talking yesterday, they think that they could get anywhere on South Bass within about 45 seconds from launch from the box. So if Sheriff Lavorchek and I actually were talking, if they had a pilot up there where they were doing this, I think if we put it on Middle Bass Island, you can cover all 3 islands. Now, it's going to take you a little bit longer to get to South. But as the sheriff and I were talking, we talk about North Bass having the cottages up there. Now, you literally could fly up, if you get a fire alarm, okay, a fire alarm or any other kind of call, you could zip that up there and get eyes on right away to make sure that, again, you had either a false alarm or a real alarm or whatever it was.
And would the notion be that would allow the township to reduce their contract with the sheriff, saving money? Or is this just an added layer?
It's a combination of both. It provides better situational awareness. So let's say you get a call, disorderly conduct or something. You fly that drone out, and there's nothing there. You fly it around, you're not seeing anything. There's nothing imminent that you're seeing as you fly that drone. Then maybe it allows a little more time for you to get there in the regular course of your patrolling. Maybe it allows a little more time for ODNR. You can share that information with ODNR. It just allows for better situational awareness to kind of act as not only a what am I getting into as I go up there, but screening in, screening out the triage of some of these cases.
Like, let's just say somebody reports a suspicious car.
Yeah.
Something, and the car's gone. So the drone is going there. This is what we talked about with the drones first responder program. Maybe it's 10, maybe it's 15% of calls. They might not even be existing.
Right.
And we're sending resources when we didn't have to. This gets you immediate eyes. And to piggyback on another point you made, Director, sorry to interrupt your time.
No, please, no, this is
But-
our time.
Yeah, but multiple places can have access to the same camera. So ODNR can see what Put-in-Bay sees, what the Sheriff's Department sees. This can be shared. So while it might be launching from Put-in-Bay, that doesn't mean the only pilot has to be from that location. So multiple people could have that and see what they see. So if ODNR is the responder to that call, they can see it before whoever. It's now shared. It's actually regionalizing communication and shared vision simultaneously. That's why I love DFR so much, is maybe there is no threat there right now. Okay, as you said, normal course of action, or it's not there anymore, it's gone.
Right. Right. And we talked early on about just being able to screen out 15% of your ghost responses saves a huge amount of money.
And I love the presentation on this. I mean, I was really impressed and thought about all the different applications for the islands. But then someone raised the concern that with 3 miles within, or 3 airports within a 2-mile span and all the aircraft that goes in, that it would be problematic utilizing it in this space. If it say if it identifies a helicopter coming in, it drops.
Right.
And then is it able to be utilized still? Will you be able to utilize it
Yeah, that pilot, I believe that pilot still has access to that drone. Yeah.
Okay,
It
so
just
it's-
drops to 100 feet and doesn't let it, I don't think it lets it go back up until that threat is gone.
Okay, so and I would love to get just a little more information
yeah.
about, how that would work, because I think this is a great idea. And certainly it could, improve efficiencies and making sure that, I just see it as being a great way to help keep people safer.
Yeah, so what we talked about this, I talked to somebody about this earlier on, is, let's say it's hawking, somebody falls off a cliff or something like that. You literally fly that drone out there and then give the EMS and your first responders the situational awareness. Hey, you're gonna need these ropes, you're gonna need this basket, you're gonna need, here's the best way to get to the person. It's leveraging technology to put our first responders in a better position. And I think when you're dealing with some of these calls, you're going to see some cost efficiency built in. Absolutely. So what we talked about is it pays for it. It'll probably pay for itself just in the calls you're able to screen out. Is what we kind of talked about.
Opening volley. Like, we keep talking about like data and stuff like that, and we're arguing about monies and stuff like that. Like, at least this is progress towards something. Nobody's saying anything's unsafe. I've never even heard that during this group, that the parks are unsafe. But it's adding an extra level of faster response or no response.
Right.
So you can maintain those resources. So the township, the municipalities, the sheriff's departments, whoever, they're saving money by not having to respond or responding faster. So they're cutting the response time in half. And it's not an overly expensive piece of hardware. So the state's not leveraging, like, it's not going to be a huge ask, I feel, in the long term of things here. Like, this is $50,000 a year for one drone. And I don't know what else you guys worked out with 2 or 3. And depending on what companies you guys go with, it might be a little bit more or less. But overall, I mean, it's an immediate response to why this group was formed, to at least move the ball forward while more data is gotten. And I think that's what was said today. Like, we want more data, we want more of this. I mean, that could take a long period of time. How about a little shot in the arm to at least move the pin forward?
And if it reduces the contract that Put-in-Bay has to pay to the sheriff, that is what we were trying to do here.
Oh, yeah. No, I love it. If this will work with the islands and is something that's doable, I think it's a great, I love this.
I don't know what it's gonna do with the contract. I don't know why that keeps coming up. I don't anticipate a drone lowering the contract, because I'm still gonna have to have deputies there. So I don't wanna have any misinformation there.
So let me ask a couple questions. Clearly from the conversation here, I think we would all agree that the islands and probably Hocking Hills would be two areas that we'd want to run pilots. So the question, I guess, for us would be, if we were gonna make our recommendation to run a couple pilot programs using drone as a first responder in state parks, how many pilots would we wanna run? And where would we only wanna run 2 of them? Would we wanna pick another park and try to throw it in another park? I think the recommendation has to come with some level of specificity so we know how much funding is attached to it.
And I don't, the radius, would this be able to also reach Kelly's Island?
Ooh, we'd have to get back with you on that. I don't know the answer to that, so.
I think a recommendation for the 2 pilots makes sense.
Okay.
Looking at, and I'm sorry, but data matters when you're making decisions. Looking at the data on where there are, additional or the most runs, it makes sense for those 2 properties or those 2 areas to be the pilots. And maybe it's written, pilot and explore. So I don't know what the deadline is for the report, right? So I don't know that we'll be able to have the pilot before the deadline, but we can definitely make a recommendation to pilot.
Yeah, no, this would be a recommendation in the report.
Perfect.
For a pilot program, because I think eventually it's gonna have to be a budget ask somewhere, so.
Thing that the senator brought up as well, just to give you just a quick Google search. NYPD uses Skydio, which is very similar to Flock, near LaGuardia, which is apparently the most traveled Class B airport. This is great. I mean, Google's really great. I can't believe I sound so smart right now. But, and they are able to use the drone as first responder program in that area with that Class B, and they have the most flights in and out. So all this technology that lowers it and diverts, and the radar is being used currently in NYPD.
Double check on like the parasailing and some of the recreational activities that happen on the lake as well, just making sure everyone is safe.
I did ask a question. I said, hey, look, have your drones ever hit something in the air? Have they ever hit some other item flying? And they said no.
I mean, I think the entity that has to determine if it's gonna work safely is the one that takes ownership of it. So
Right.
whether that is the Hocking Hills EMS, the local police department down there, I'm looking at Pat, I don't know which one that is, but, or whether it's the Ottawa County Sheriff or the Put-in Bay Police Department, they would have to satisfy themselves that they could operate it safely, right? I mean, they would be the ones on the hook for it.
But you can have more than one. So like we're getting one, our fire department and police department will each have a pilot. So if the fire department's going out, they can launch their own drone and vice versa. So it benefits both. You just have to have a pilot.
Right. I would say that. Go ahead, Chair. Well,
Can I ask a quick question?
yeah, I might answer your question. Go ahead. Mhm.
Well, so I have my own drone program here, and obviously drones are supposed to be line of sight. A DFR program is not necessarily line of sight, because this thing can fly 4 miles in each direction. And if you're launching it and you're not where the drone is at, obviously it's not line of sight. That is my question. Big difference from when we pop a drone at a scene and I've got a guy that's flying it, searching for a missing child or anything like that, or a suspect. We're pretty much line of sight or within a mile of the drone. But when we're talking someone from the mainland launching a drone that's going 3 miles across the lake and then over South Bass Island and over a community, I guess that's my question. Is there an issue there?
These DFR programs, I'm pretty sure, have a waiver for the line of sight requirement.
Oh, I'm sure there's a waiver, but my
Yeah.
question is it?
Oh no, they use
I'm not.
they use
I
this
get it.
stuff.
I
Yeah, they
need
use
to
this
see
stuff
it.
overseas. It's used all over the place. It'll, again, your pilots have to be trained up on how to do it, but the technology is just absolutely amazing. So.
Did we say that we're going to try to set up a time to see it in action and in person?
Yeah.
I thought we talked about that at the last meeting.
We
where
did,
maybe
we did. We talked about doing it when it was warmer, but actually we can do it from here. So yeah, we could probably set that up. I want to get more into crunching out these recommendations, but yeah, we could probably set up. The other thing too is what we could do, I suppose, is, and I'll check this, maybe we could set something up between the two meetings where everybody could just sign on and watch it.
from their phones.
Yeah, watch it. Yeah, my guess is that technology exists so that we could probably all watch from your home stations if you were interested.
And I would have the people we intend to operate it join that as
Yes,
well.
yes, yeah.
Right, because they, at the end of the day, they've got to be willing to do it.
And what I was going to, yeah, I agree with that. What I was going to say, Sheriff, one of the things that I was going to say is because it would be in a pilot format, again, probably a 2-year pilot to run with the budget, I would say that we put one in the hands of locals. So you could run the one for the islands, and I'd say we put one maybe down at Hocking, have DNR run the one down at Hocking if you wanted to. I don't.
Have to think about,
Yeah.
Because, then that pulls our resources off our very few resources off the road. But, I mean, we can talk to the Hocking local.
Right.
They might want to do it.
Right, and
They're a
you-
great team down there, so.
Yep.
What are the recommendations, since there are still questions, and I think we want to move right to more, was, something about explore the feasibility, including the potential of 2 pilots. That way, we can answer all those questions between, because we simply don't know.
Right. I think the recommendation would have to be solid enough, though, to recommend funding. Notice I'm pointing. would
So
have
you
to be
need
to run
okay.
with the next budget cycle. Yeah. So, because what we don't want to do is just a feasibility study that then says, yes, this is feasible, and then we should fund it, and then not have any funding for it. I think we should say, hey, look, in the next budget, we need to set aside money to fund a pilot program for DFR in state parks, I think.
And we're
So,
confident that the other questions can get resolved before that point. So if we say pilot, we're committed to pilot and asking for funding,
right.
you're comfortable,
Right.
Okay.
And that's the beauty of a pilot is if it's not worth the investment, right? If it doesn't work the way that everybody wants it to work, and if it's not effective, we haven't overinvested. It's a 2-year pilot. We tried it. My guess is it's going to be you're going to be hooked. It's going to be like the free hit. You're going to take it. You're going to like it, and then we're going to be like, hey, this is something we need to try in other spaces. That would be my guess on this technology. So, any other questions or comments on that? Yeah, we are at we're at time. We're running out of time.
I think we're going to go around and get everybody's best.
Yes. So
hit, but-
what we want to do is we want to go around the table, and the next meeting we set up is going to be all about. It's just going to be recommendations. We're going to deliberate through the rest of these recommendations. So I think we can walk out of here with the DFR recommendation, because the rest of them that we were going to talk about are again funding and grants and a little more complex. We're going to dedicate our time to all of our time next time to that. What I do want to do, though, is I do want to go around the table and have everybody basically tell us one recommendation you'd like to see. As we've listened to all of this, what would you like to see as a recommendation in this report, or what do you think we should deliberate on as a recommendation in this report the next time around? So, and then we're going to capture that, and that'll be part of our debate next time. So, Melinda, we'll start with you, and we'll go around. Yeah, actually.
I would say one of the things is better partnerships and training, perhaps, with safety services and the tourism community, the CVBs, so to speak, about messaging and how that can be used to increase safety.
Excellent. Andrew, you getting them? Excellent. Bill?
I don't know that's anything earth-shattering. I do like the idea of the DFR program. I think it's got a lot of potential.
No, I think that if there's a way to continue the partnership, the question the senator had about inclusion of the other island, if we're talking of that as a pilot, but nothing beyond that, sir.
As it relates to not all the topics, but one of them was probably funding of services. Just for the information I've seen, I haven't seen anything that supports that we need to do anything different. I think we all work together already. We train together. We've done over 8,500 calls to state parks, and I think the structure is in place to assist all supporting groups. So I guess probably for the discussion, I don't really have a recommendation other than probably don't recommend probably funding of any group, because the funding's already there. We've helped them. You know, they unfortunately lost an officer in 2021. We provided all the park security for them during that entire event for them. We've responded whenever they need at ODNR, and the Sheriff's Department has 911. And if ODR is not available, they can let us know. We could also respond to be supportive. And I don't think that's probably being utilized enough, maybe because if ODR, Sheriff's Department probably makes a call and ODR is not available, we're probably not contacted. I think there's an area there that we're in the parks at ODNR's request or whatever they need. I just don't see what I've heard, all these things I've heard. I haven't seen anything to support changing how we're doing when it comes to law enforcement or funding of additional law enforcement. 31 years ago, I responded to Put-in-Bay every summer as a trooper at the Sandusky post for 31 years. And we've been doing it for a long time. And we do it during the summertime when they need support. We've sent mobile field force there when they requested, and they thought a lot of boats were coming from Detroit in that area, so we supported them in that. So we're always willing to support. Aviation can support in the wintertime to transport people. So I look forward to those discussions probably more than anything. I think the funding, which you guys were talking about, the drone is good. Probably more if somebody leaves the scene. You know, you get calls. These are islands, so it's a little different talking about islands when you talk about drones because it's a very compact geographical area. But I do find value if somebody is there and they leave before you get there. I think it can collect some good information for you for investigations and stuff. So look forward to it.
Colonel, thank you. Chief?
I mean, you guys all know the drone as first responder is something that I'm very passionate about. I think that solves the problem on regionalization and collective group. I don't think we give a drone to any group that is not willing to invest in regionalization, as in the training and shared knowledge, not combining departments. I'm not trying to say anything like that, but multiple pilots. If the dispatch center is doing it, this is not new hires. This is not, you need to take somebody off the road and put them as a pilot waiting to respond. It can be done in multiple different ways. So continuing to look at that and then setting up a pilot program where then we can collect the data and see if it's useful. If it's not, we find another way, but we see if this is technology is the way that we can really make a difference and enhance safety. Not make it safer, because we know they're safe, but enhance and add a little extra element to it.
Thanks, Chief. Chief?
On the EMS side, I could see it being valuable to go into those state parks if the drones can carry a payload of like an AED, a couple tourniquets, EpiPens, and that way the pilot, if he's EMD trained, just like the dispatchers are, he can walk that patient through whatever treatment needs to be done until EMS arrives on the scene or fire arrives on the scene. I think it would be a valuable resource, and it may even save lives at some point. And like you said, when we're going in, we can actually look at what the cliff looks like and know exactly, because I've been to Hocking. They've got some dangerous cliffs down there, so.
Thank you, Chief. Real quick, I think what you'd see if we ran a pilot of just the effectiveness of a basic drone as a first responder, I think what you're talking about probably is the second iteration. I think the people who are running the pilot would be like, this is the greatest thing ever. If I could only deliver this, or if I could only deliver that. And I could see that being what we learn from the pilot that eventually gets funded as technology continues to improve in that 2 years that the pilot's going on. So great recommendation. Dan?
I totally support the idea of the DFR for situational awareness that we're talking about. I think a next step, if we're going to be talking about grant funding potentially for those agencies, I'm going to talk about fire and EMS that have a responsibility to respond to parks in their response areas. Somebody needs to reach out to those individual agencies to get the data from those agencies, to talk about the total number of runs that are dispatched to those state parks, and then take a look at that data to determine maybe to build some sort of a grant program to make available to those agencies that have a funding issue.
Dan, I just heard you volunteer to do that, is what I heard. Pat?
Thanks, Director. I don't mean to jump on the bandwagon of drones, and I don't mean to offend anybody in the room, but I'm a little more cautious when it comes to the drone technology. I think it's great. I see the potential. But what I'm also concerned about is specifically if we look at South Bass Island, the majority of the calls that we've talked about that drones are going to law enforcement, I think is where it comes into play the most, where you got that pre-deployment, maybe it's a car that's gone on arrival that we don't need to send somebody. But the majority of all the EMS runs that we've talked about are already confirmed that they need an ambulance to go. So, the drone technology can give that pre-deployment information and help that response from fire and EMS, but we're still going to have to send fire and EMS to handle that. So my concern is that I think the layered approach is great. If we got a 2-year pilot budget in the state budget to fund it, my concern is what comes after that. So if we put that drone at South Bass Island, Ottawa County Sheriff's Office is running it. After the 2-year pilot, we say it was a great investment, we want to continue it, but there's no state funding there, who's running it? So does that then go to the Ottawa County Sheriff, who then goes back to the township and asks for $50,000 more a year? If it goes to Hocking and we run it, we will have to explore the expense of a pilot. Then you have that pilot that has the overtime hours. Does that equate to being the benefit in the end? I don't know, because I haven't been involved as much as you guys are, but I go into it a little more cautious and skeptical in that regard. So kind of the feasibility of it, I appreciate knowing some more of that background information before I can be fully on board. But I certainly think the layered approach is great. I just get concerned long term. We're already talking about a financial burden for the general revenue fund and state funds to go into our program to do the work that we do. Does that get further diluted by layering in additional expenses on top of that is my concerns.
Right. Yeah, and I think the whole concept of the pilot, the 2-year pilot, is a proof, it's due diligence. It's a proof of concept. And if it works and it's good, then you can go back to the General Assembly and say, hey, look, this is the future. This is where we're at. This needs to be funded at a higher level. So good. Josh?
Yeah, so obviously we spent a lot of time kind of focused in on a couple places, right? Which are by their very nature very unique places. And I think, rather than casting a real broad brush on all of our parks, my experience was I spent 10 years as an officer at Mohican, and I know from the local level, there's a lot of nights that only myself and the Loudonville Police were the only officers in the county, south part of the county, and we went all over wherever it was needed. So while there are times, because we're not a 24/7 nature, we need support, we also provide a lot of support back as well. So, there are specific challenges. I think we need to dive into those specific challenges and also get more data to see exactly where maybe we're coming up short and what could be done in those places. And, I know Deer Creek came up before, and it's one of my parks. It's actually my first park I spent as an officer. Even though there's no hotels in there, we do have a lodge that provided $173,000 in lodging tax revenue last year. So I know there's other parks that don't fit that mold, and I know that wasn't necessarily your point, but there are other things to consider on that as well. So,
thank you, Senator.
Yeah. I'm talking about the initial budget request. Understanding that we put that in, we limited it to the islands, that there would be reimbursements to the locals for runs on the state park property. And as we talked through this work group, the islands really are an outlier. And I think Hocking Hills, to some respect, is an outlier in a different way. And so I kind of go back to, should we do something statewide that would address needs that really aren't relevant in other parts of Ohio, but the islands having a very small population of people carrying the burden of responses onto state property. Sheriff? Did Sheriff say something?
I think he was talking to somebody. I think somebody.
Oh, okay. And so I kind of go back to, should we treat the islands a little differently just because of the unique circumstances? They don't have a neighboring community that can come and give assistance without getting on a ferry, getting equipment, and getting over there, or by aircraft or some other means. So I kind of go back and say, does it make sense to treat the islands differently because of the unique circumstances and because they are an outlier when we talk about the circumstances across the state and across the state parks?
Thank you, Senator. Hey, Sheriff Lavorchak, you there?
Yes, sir.
All right, I'm going to go to you next because if I don't, I'm going to get to the end of the table and forget because I'm not looking at you. I'm going to forget you there. But since I just heard you, I'm going to go to you right now. So what do you have as far as key recommendations you'd like to see come out?
Honestly, this entire committee sort of caught me off guard when you asked me about it and asked me to be on it. And the reason is the partnership that we have with ODNR. We have a great partnership. I have no complaints. I have no expectations of anything different. When I met with the colonel up here, we talked about it, and I even told him, I said, I don't have any needs. I have a budget from the county. I have a budget from Put in Bay Township. I will come in under that budget. I have every year so far. I will continue to do that. So the funding doesn't really pertain to me. It pertains to the local government, which would be Put in Bay Township. The township trustees obviously would like to have help with their funding, with EMS, with fire, whoever else might be handling calls out there. As far as from my standpoint, I don't have a problem with the budget. I don't have a problem with coming in under budget. And I love the partnership that we have. We have a great partnership, not only with ODNR, as Colonel Swindell already told you, we have a great partnership with them. They come over and they help us on South Bass Island for traffic every year. But what I try to keep in mind is what I've been told already is this summer, ODNR will have 24/7 coverage on South Bass Island at State Park. That's huge. And I think that's a huge step forward. And I look forward to that partnership growing. As far as the Drone as a First Responder program, I'm interested in it. I have to concur with the comment I heard a minute ago as to at the end of the 2 years, what's it look like? And where do we go from there? But currently, yeah, I absolutely would love to see the program, love to see it rolled out as far as what it looks like. But needs from my office as far as South Bass Island State Park and the other state parks on the islands, we're going to continue doing what we do, regardless of where the committee goes.
Appreciate you. So for me, there are two things that are tied together. Number one is if we are leaving local lodging tax on the table, that we don't have the teeth or we're not effectively going to gather or to collect, that could help defer some of the cost on some of these issues, then we need to make sure that we are addressing that. The second thing is if there are small rentals, if there are rentals or lodging places that are acting as hotels for all intents and purposes, and they are avoiding paying the same taxes that other lodging facilities are, we probably ought to take a look at that because the concept is the same, that you're reaping a benefit from providing this service, but you're also reaping a benefit and not having to pay your share for government services that are provided there. So I think we probably need to take a look at that as well. So those are my two. Director?
I think it's about the money in small communities, right? So I think state parks are an economic engine. We are generating revenue through sales tax and lodging tax and all the additional money that comes in these communities. And the places where there are more people coming, where the tourism is higher, we are generating more money. So it's how do we fairly get that money out there? I mean, the county is getting some money, so maybe it's conversations with counties that are in high tourist areas. How can we make sure some of that goes to support the emergency services? How can we make sure the right townships are benefiting from that tourism boom in their area. What do we need to do so they can get what they need? And I think, you know, I want the CVBs to continue to spend money on marketing, but if there's a little bit that they can use to help. So I'm perplexed as to why Put-in-Bay hasn't asked them yet to, you know, Lakes and Shores, hey, be part of the solution here. I think they'll have that opportunity, you know, and I hope they will. So, I mean, the money is there, but maybe it's just not, it's not playing out how it should in the most equitable way to support those small communities. So my recommendation is to look at that. Where does the money go, and how do we make it make sense? And I can tell Cindy, you
Oh,
wanted
no,
to.
I was just gonna say, and we've been talking about the township, but there's also the village of Put-in-Bay that
Right.
has, you know, local needs as well. They have police force themselves, but,
Right.
but unique circumstances. I think they need like 6 year-round officers, but I think they need to hire something like 30 for the summer.
Are you talking about the police department? Sylvia?
Yeah, the police department.
They have nothing to do with the state park.
Yeah,
There's no
that's
jurisdiction.
Okay, so they don't provide any resources to the
Nope.
state park? Okay, fair
Nope.
enough.
Yeah.
They're a mile and a half away from the state park, a mile away, probably a mile away from the state park. They have no jurisdiction whatsoever out there.
Perfect. Hey, thank you.
Thank you. Heidi? Oh, I'm sorry, Director.
Well, I too appreciate the drone program, but I also echo the concern with respect to its fire and EMS calls, at least, you know, for our folks going in, not necessarily the police calls. So, but it could help those fire and EMS departments know what to expect when they get there. So I do appreciate that. I appreciate the mention of the lodging tax and the short-term rental, forcing short-term rentals to also collect the lodging tax. I think that would be great. But I am going to go back to the grant, some type of grant program for those entities that might need specialized equipment because of trails and their fire department can't afford that four-wheeler, or some type of partnership, or, you know, again, Chief, working with what you brought up today about your shared resources, you know, figuring out a better system so that, you know, when those special needs are, you know, that come up in a state park situation, those local, mostly volunteer, part-time folks have the resources that they need to make sure the people that are calling for that service are getting the service that they need. So that, I would appreciate further discussion on something like that.
Heidi, thank you. Listen, we've gone way past, so I appreciate everybody's time. Andrew, we got the next one on the books? Okay. So we will get the next one on the books. That'll be our last one. We'll hammer out what the actual recommendations are, what the verbiage will look like, and then we'll issue a report following that. So any questions anybody has, hit Andrew with an email. We should be good to go. Andrew, thank you very much for all your...
Soon, we'll get it scheduled soon.
There you
So
go.
just-
Got you. Yep. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.